So as many of you will know, Nintendo recently released the Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 remakes for Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2. In the time since, the speedrun community has been able to investigate and test these new versions in order to understand how they compare to previous iterations of the games. And today I'm going to be talking about whether speedruns will be done on the new remakes or not and why. So let's jump right in and learn what's changed. One thing I imagine many people will be wondering is whether speedrun glitches and tricks still work. Was anything patched in the remakes? Fortunately, the answer to that is a firm no. If a shortcut or skip worked in the original games, it still works just fine in the remakes. Any gravity skip or sequence break or walls you can clip through all function just the same and shouldn't look or feel any different to how it was beforehand. Furthermore, any glitches like the mid-air 2-player jump in SMG1 or the famous Yoshi infinite flutter glitch in SMG2 are also still in the game. I could go on and give a bunch of examples, but ultimately I can't sell it enough just how much nothing got patched and that gameplay-wise, speedruns of both games are going to be the same going forward. There is one technical exception to this, and the keyword there is technical. It's not because Nintendo was trying to get rid of this thing via changing the physics engine or level data. In fact, it was probably completely unintentional. I'll explain what I mean later, but I don't think it changes the overall fact, which is that no attempt was made to patch glitches or skips in the Super Mario Galaxy Switch remakes. With that out the way, I'm going to take a brief moment to ask you to click the like button and subscribe. It's completely free, really helps out my channel, and of course you can always change your mind later. So now that we know we're not going to have to change gameplay, the job instead becomes figuring out whether more technical changes made to the game make it faster than other versions, and thus preferred for speedruns. And because the results were a bit different for both games, I'm going to start with SMG1. We expected changes, if any, would probably be due to faster loading times when entering levels or domes. This comes from Nintendo's technology becoming more advanced with time. But the loading times on the Nintendo Switch Super Mario 3D All-Stars Collection, which was the best version beforehand, already are pretty fast. So we suspected it may only be a slight improvement as they can only make the loads so quick. For example, if a loading screen lasts 1 second, you can only improve it by 1 second to make it last no time at all. You can't improve it by 2 seconds because then you'd have a -1 second loading screen, which doesn't make sense. But in a move I don't think anyone saw coming, the loads were somehow slower? What? Yeah, on a brand new console, the loads are slower compared with the 5-year-old 3D All-Stars version, which is very strange. But okay, the loads on Switch 2 compared with 3D All-Stars lose around 35 seconds for any percent. That's quite annoying, but what was also surprising was what else changed, some of which loses time and some of which saves time. At the end of each level in Super Mario Galaxy, there's a prompt to either save or not save, and speedrunners historically would choose to not save, as otherwise the game takes a few seconds to update the file. But in the remakes, the game now automatically saves after each level, and this text box is skipped outright, saving 1.2 seconds each time, overall adding up to 1 minute and 12 seconds saved in an any percent speedrun. Pretty cool stuff, but there's more. Normally, when you unlock a new galaxy, the game notifies you about it as shown here. The same thing happens in the remake, only you can skip it now for a total time save of 24 seconds. So far this may seem good, but there's also another small drawback I need to discuss as well. When you select a galaxy you want to play, it does a little animation with a launch star. And this animation is half a second longer in the remake because Nintendo felt like it. And because it happens 57 times in the any percent speedrun, that equals nearly 30 seconds lost. These factors and a few other smaller ones make for an overall net time save of 31 seconds in any percent. So that's pretty cool, but let's talk about the other main category in SMG1, 120 stars. There's a lot of things we've already talked about, such as more loading screens which lose time, but also more save prompt skips which save time. But also some unique things. Firstly, despite the game being no more of an upgrade than 3D All-Stars was, the credits are quite a bit longer with several dozen names sloppily added on literally right after it says the end. And this wastes our speedrunners around 20 seconds as you have to watch it during the 120 star category to unlock the purple coins. But this is more than made up for by the fact that when you fight the final Bowser for the second time at the end of the run, there are a lot of cutscenes that are now skippable by pressing the A button, saving around 59 seconds in total. Overall, this is looking pretty good so far for Team Remake, but there's something important to talk about. Remember earlier how I said there was one exception to speedrun tricks getting patched? Well, at the beginning of the game during the Star Festival sequence, you can skip the first cutscene where Bowser shows up by pausing the game frame perfectly, saving the game and then choosing to exit to the main menu and going back to the same file you skip the cutscene, saving around a minute. However, with the new auto-saving, they for some reason removed the ability to save when quitting during the Star Festival, so this trick just can't work anymore. Strangely, in the Comet Observatory you can still save and quit just fine, but they left it out here for some reason. This creates the weird situation where after tallying all the results, any percent Luigi is faster by around 31 seconds, but any percent Mario is slower by 45. And similarly, 120 Luigi is faster by 1 minute and 41 seconds, whereas 120 Mario it's only 25 seconds, with Luigi runs being unaffected because he starts further ahead on the gateway instead of the Star Festival. However, Star Festival skip is one of the hardest tricks in the game and is usually only done by players at or near world record level. For 99% of people as a result, the remake is actually still faster for any percent Mario. It's just that for those at the top, sticking on 3D All-Stars for that category ends up being the best. So just keep that in mind. So this all seems quite good, but I did something sneaky without you realizing, where I said this is all how 3D All-Stars compares to the remake on Switch 2. On the Switch 1 remake, however, the load times as you might be able to imagine are slower, and so adjusting timers to account for that. Ah shit. So the SMG1 remake on Switch 1 is significantly slower than the 3D All-Stars version. So if you have a Switch 1 and no Switch 2, which statistically is probably the case, the remake to you is kinda useless. It's pretty frustrating that whilst yes, the remake is technically the new fastest version, but only if you play on the new console. You might be thinking, wouldn't this apply to 3D All-Stars too, as that can be played on both Switches? Well, yes, but only by a very small amount. How small, you ask? Well, for any percent, it's a 7-second difference. That's basically nothing. And in contrast, somehow in the new remake's case, the difference between consoles is absolutely massive in a way that completely screws things up. In any case, it is still cool to have a new fastest version for speedrunning, even if it's only better on a new and expensive console that makes competing at the highest level hard to access. We've already had multiple world records broken on the new version, so there's still a good chunk of positives to come out of this for SMG1, even if there are some pretty big drawbacks as well that we now have to deal with. And for what it's worth, you can still do speedruns on Switch 1 with the remake if that's all you have. It's just going to be significantly slower than on Switch 2 or 3D All-Stars. I'll also note that the work done to time all of this was pretty immense and took a lot of effort, and also I had no part in it. It was instead done mainly by two community members, Azulon and Silo, so thank you so much to them for all their hard work. Everything I've said here has been from their findings, the full version of which I will leave a link in the description to. It's now time to discuss Super Mario Galaxy 2, where things are not the best, we'll say. As many of you will likely know for reasons unbeknownst to us mortals, SMG2 is not part of 3D All-Stars. So the comparisons here are made to the Chinese disc on Wii for any percent, and the Japanese Wii U Virtual Console version for 120 stars, 242 stars, and green stars, which are the fastest ways of playing each respective category. Considering how old these consoles are, surely the load times should be faster now, right? It would be good because it means both games can now be done on both Switch 1 and or 2. Well, one of the most fundamental components of all SMG2 categories bar green stars is Bank Toad. Bank Toad appears on Starship Mario, and with him you can transfer star bits from one file to another. This is extremely useful as you can use them to feed the various hungry Lumas throughout your speedrun, and so you literally don't have to collect any star bits unlike in SMG1. So on Switch, when you're doing your speedrun, you just have to go to Bank Toad. Wait a minute. No way. They didn't. Oh, no, 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 no.
Well, what does that mean?
It means your friend's gone.
We know he's gone. That's why we're trying to find him.
No, I mean he's gone. He doesn't exist.
So in an effort to promote the fact that using an amiibo in this game gives you starbits now, Bank Toad's ability to transfer starbits was straight up removed from the game. Yes, you heard that right. Nintendo literally made a remake of a game, charged you $70 for it, and then removed a native feature from that game. That is, in scientific terms, batshit crazy. Like, what on earth were they thinking? They literally made the game worse and got rid of something that was legitimately useful. On the plus side though, I think this is a beautifully poetic illustration of the state of the Galaxy remakes. Nintendo sells you a remake of a game you probably already owned, adds basically no new content, removed a useful part of it for no reason, and in its place the NPC associated with it tells you that if you give Nintendo more money, you'll get a worse version of that feature. Just chef's kiss. You couldn't write this. So what does this mean? Well, even though proper timings haven't been completed yet as I write this, the big picture already seems pretty clear. The hopes of using the SMG2 remake for speedruns of any percent at 120 stars and 242 stars are basically dead in the water. Which is just very unfortunate that this bizarre change means a whole new version basically doesn't matter, and speedruns will have to stay on those aging consoles. But alas, it's only the green stars category that remains unaffected by the Bank Toad situation. So how's that doing? Well, watch this. Did you see that? Notice how I, Oddme, was able to skip the opening cutscene of the level? Those things, whilst they aren't very long, there's a lot of them, so wouldn't the ability to skip them save a lot of time? Well, indeed. You'd be right. Every single Green Star's opening cutscene, each one lasts about 15 seconds might I add, can now be completely skipped, which is absolutely massive. Early estimates are at about 12 minutes on Switch 2 and a respectable 8 minutes on Switch 1 being saved for the category. That's significantly more than anything in SMG 1 and is light years ahead of the other SMG 2 categories. So that seems like it would be pretty good news. At least one category gets to have a big win from the remakes, right? Well, here's the thing. Green Stars is kind of the black sheep of SMG 1 and 2 categories. It begins on a file with the main 120 stars already unlocked, and finishes upon collecting the 120th and final Green Star. It thus marks the second main part of the 242 stars category, which ends on the perfect run in the Grandmaster Galaxy. But because of all this, a lot of people treat greens as just kind of a practice category for 242 star runs, a means to an end if you will. As a matter of fact, it's actually possible to get 3 personal bests and even 3 world records in 120, greens, and 242 all at once. And since all 3 categories were fastest on the same version, it was easy to compare them, but now that greens is fastest on Switch, this fine balance is disrupted. There will never be a world record hat trick ever again. It's a fairly minor issue, but it's stuff like this that drives home just how much of a silver lining the cutscene skip time save is. Greens is the least popular SMG2 category, and even though it's absolutely real and should be respected, getting a good time is still a tricky feat. It's definitely the one that's taken the least seriously and not necessarily for bad reasons. So all in all, the Super Mario Galaxy Switch remakes have generally left a fairly sour taste in the speedrun community's mouth. There's a lot of very strange and downright idiotic choices that were made with these remakes that even outside of a speedrun context just do not make sense. SMG1 definitely got it the best, with just one exception: we now have a new fastest version, but I wouldn't even say people are that excited about it because ultimately it's a couple of minutes at most in a game that's already very long by most metrics, and if anything, we kinda expected more than what we got. Even though the 3D All-Stars loads were pretty fast, we were all surprised to see they were somehow slower. We also had hopes that maybe more cutscenes could have been skipped. Like imagine if they applied the level opening cutscene skips in greens to all levels of both games. That would be an absolute game changer. SMG1 any percent alone would have probably gotten at least 10 minutes faster, and in both games' 242 categories, time save could have been upwards of an hour. Maybe we were too optimistic, but I think it wasn't unreasonable to assume some quality of life features would have made it in that could have helped a ton, especially considering the price. And of course, absolutely no one foresaw or was even remotely prepared for Bank Toad getting removed from SMG2. It especially sucked because this was the game's first debut on Switch, so we hoped it would now be the best version so we could move away from the older consoles, but for the time being we're stuck on them. Was the $70 worth it? I'll let you decide, but for us speedrunners, these remakes have on many fronts been a disappointment that could have been so much more than what we got. Despite their price, they barely change anything for casual players and simultaneously will barely change anything for speedruns. In any case, however, we will continue forward to optimize our 2 games to the best of our abilities and shave off as much time as possible until the forces of the universe stop us in our tracks. And we've made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful and that you understand where the speedrunning community is at in regards to the new remakes. Since this topic is still evolving, I'll have the pinned comment for anything that changes, or if I left anything out, it'll all be down there, so if you've made it this far, I would highly recommend giving that a read. Furthermore, I want to thank everyone for the support on the previous video. It did way better than I expected with over 9,000 views, so thank you all so much. Anyway, more videos are coming soon, so stay tuned for those, and thank you all for watching.